Hey, are we ready?
Good to go.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Thanks for choosing to spend an hour with us. Before we start, I just want to make everyone aware that we hope that this is a lively discussion and we really encourage participation. So during the discussion, please use the chat, use the reactions, or raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question or provide a comment. Today's talk is on the use of meaningful rewards and recognition to incentivize and motivate safe behaviors in the workplace. But before I introduce our main speaker and panelists, I'd like to give the floor to Peter Goldwasser, our Executive Director of TSR, for a welcome message.
Thank you so much, Jess. Thank you to you and your entire team at Quirky for being such fantastic partners with our TSR Talks. So welcome everybody. Just a quick message from me. And so as folks know, Peter Goldwasser, Executive Director of Together for Safer Roads. And the reason why we do these TSR Talks is really to provide an opportunity for all of you and then the wider community to come together and talk about interesting, important issues as it relates to fleet safety. We've now in our second year of doing these TSR talks, and we've had conversations on everything from um, how to effectively create storytelling to drive change, to high vision vehicles, to telematics, to seatbelts. And I'm particularly excited about today's topic, what motivates drivers to prioritize safety. Um, what I've heard, and I know others have heard a lot over the years, is how do we figure out the best ways to meet our drivers, our frontline workers here, where they're at in terms of, and how do we better understand what's going to make them operate in the safest manner possible? And at TSR, we do a lot of work, including our focus on fleet safety program. But one key thing that we've heard bubbled up and that we wanted to sort of dive into and take the time today is there a way to create very thoughtful, strategic, data-driven approaches to creating incentive programs to motivate drivers? And if so, what does that look like? What works, what doesn't? I think in some of our beginning copy, we were joking around, being a little facetious about like, is it pizza? Is it tickets to the Yankees game or the Mets? Hopefully not the Mets. I see some people, depending on where you are, but all joking aside, what drives drivers to be safer and others within your safety, others within in your fleet and your organization? Are there best practices? And then also, how do you create them? How do you track it? Do you need data? Can you do it without data? What does that look like? How big and complicated does a program need to be? So these are all sort of questions that we thought would be particularly interesting. And then we said, well, who should we turn to? Who would be an expert in there? And we were connected with Brian Galnick and his team, which I'm sure a lot of folks on this call know. Brian has been phenomenal, lifelong expert in this field from All-Star Incentive Marketing, doing a lot of this work. And so we're thrilled to welcome Brian. We're thrilled to welcome Fenster and a few others. And then hopefully all of you who have joined here will participate, as Jess said, in the conversation. And so again, TSR and the TSR talks are really only as good and valuable as you all and the experience and expertise that you bring. So I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. I'm excited for the conversation. I encourage you to raise your hand, to put comments in the chat bar. And without further ado, I'll hand it back over to Jess, who will continue on with the introductions and we'll dive right in it. But again, thanks so much, and I look forward to a great conversation.
Thanks, Peter. As Peter said, we have a couple great speakers today, and I'll just go kind of through a quick formal bio of these two. Our main speaker, Brian Galnick, for the past 24 years, Brian has led All-Star Incentive Marketing with an overarching focus on improving the lives of workers around the globe. It's a lofty goal, but by teaching companies how to consistently target, recognize, and reward positive behaviors, All-Star is able to motivate behavioral changes in employees, resulting in healthier, happier, wealthier, and safer employees. He says it's a true win for both employees and the companies they serve. Under Brian's leadership, All-Star has developed and launched Propel, a full suite of web-based technology solutions for online program management of incentive programs. The company has also developed a vertical industry expertise, becoming one of the nation's top suppliers and winners of excellence awards for best safety and wellness incentive programs. Fenster is an experienced safety professional with over 20 years of experience in the fleet industry, specializing in innovative safety programs and operational excellence. During his extensive tenure at Republic Services, he served as safety director, spearheading a large-scale, high-impact initiatives, including their incentive program. So he can speak to theirs. In his current role as a product manager for Connected Fleets at McNeelius, Finster applies his deep industry expertise to advancing fleet technology and safety solutions. He's a recognized leader in the field and has played a key role in shaping industry-wide safety standards, including serving as vice chair of the National Waste and Recycling Association's Safety Committee. We also we're slated to have Rick Dunn with us today. He's a safety professional with AmeriGas, but unfortunately, Rick is under the weather, so we hope that he gets better soon. And so with that, I will turn it over to our featured speaker, Brian.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's great. Thank you. Special thank you to Brian Fenster. It's not Fenstedt, as it says on screen. It's Fenster. And if you get a minute, you may want to ask Fenster at a future event how he became Fenster and not Brian. It's a pretty good story. It goes back to his Republic days. But I'm really thankful he could join us here today. Really sorry that Rick Dunn is not able to join us. Rick's with AmeriGas. AmeriGas, we've worked closely with AmeriGas for a number of years now. All-Star worked very closely with Fenster and Republic Services for 20 years with Republic, and most of that, a good chunk of that time with Fenster as well. And some of that expertise, both on the Republic Services and the AmeriGas side, will be part of what we share here today to answer this sort of overarching question. Speaking of questions and comments, just mentioned this, but use the chat function. And by the way, it's not a huge group, so you can just jump in and start talking if you want to. Raise your hand or put something in the chat. Comments or questions, whether you agree, disagree, or want to talk about it further, by all means, hit us with some thoughts, and we will incorporate that and really treat this more of an overarching discussion. Even if Rick was with us in this call, we wanted it to be a panel discussion of not just us, but also you, the audience, and hear what your experiences are. So. And with that said, I guess I just wanted to make one comment. I'm from Massachusetts. I'm a Red Sox fan, which means nothing good is going to happen anytime soon for us. But Juan Soto went from the Yankees to the Mets. So I kind of feel like maybe you got to root for the Mets and all $765 million worth of him, just so Steve Cohen doesn't go bankrupt. Okay, setting that aside. Our panelists were covered already. We're going to be talking very much about the trucking environment, sort of highlight what that's all about. We're going to get into employee engagement, what it means to have a safety culture, talk about technology and recognition and the business benefits, and you can read that for yourself, so I don't have to go further with that. But that's the agenda. We're going to keep it nice and tight. We're going to do some Q&A, certainly in discussion between myself and Fenster during the presentation. But again, welcome anything that you want to bring to the table, questions or comment-wise, as we go through this. And I guess I would say that, and we were going to start with a poll question, Jess. Correct me if I'm wrong. Were we not? And if so, should we do that now?
Sure. Yep, we can do that now.
So go ahead. Let's just get out there real quick and just see if we can get a little bit of two-way conversation going. I'll go back to the slide for a second.
Sure. Hey,
There
can
it is.
everyone see the poll question?
Yes.
Okay. Is your organization currently using an employee recognition program? Yes, no, or no, I'm thinking about starting one though.
And Jess, you'll see the answers. I won't, right? So just let me know when you feel like it's at least I think that's true, and let me know when we're ready to move on.
Sure. We've got about 38% participation, so let's wait just maybe
Yep.
10 more seconds, 15.
Just looking to see who's actively currently using a program. Doesn't have to be safety specific, doesn't have to be, all encompassing, but if you're using some sort of employee recognition reward program now for your safety sensitive workers, for your drivers, let us know if you're thinking about doing it and haven't quite started one yet also, and if you're not currently using one. And let me know when we're good, Jess.
Sure, yep. We have about 52% participated. I'll go ahead and end the poll and share the results.
So there you go. A pretty wide mix. Honestly, a bit surprised that 41% are not currently using some sort of employee recognition program, but it's also going to represent something of an opportunity here, I think, together with those that are thinking about starting one, a great opportunity to, to find that next level of engagement. I did a quick sales call this morning with a prospect who said they're looking for 1%, continual 1% improvement. I'm sure that's a mantra we've heard across the board over our time, continuous improvement. And in that particular case, this company I was just speaking with this morning, which does food distribution on a very large level, the low-hanging fruit here is the employee recognition component. So just to tell you a little bit about the work, the work environment you probably already know very well. And Peter and I were talking about this. There's lots of different ways. Fenster, I'll come to you and just see if there's any other trucking environment things you want to add here in a minute. But at a very high level, talking to Peter, you get a lot of different results when you go looking for this, but using Department of Labor numbers, you got about 3.2 million drivers. There's more than that total, but in heavy drivers, tractor trailer drivers, light drivers, and delivery drivers, about 3.2 million out there across the board. So a huge number. Demographics are still largely male, but there's a growing female population, but still 91% male. Average age is 47. The rebounding freight volume piece of it is because I think we've all saw the COVID swale and swoon, and now we're truly in a bit of a new era here post-COVID, where freight volumes are coming back up again. And this last mile of delivery is just such a big thing, right? Because so many people are getting their groceries and their goods and everything delivered to them, and that last mile of delivery is the most expensive mile, and one that multiple companies, Amazon included, UPS and others are trying to get as right as they can. Rapid addition of technology. Fenster holds a really interesting position here, having spent a lot of time at Republic and now being with McNeilius, and he can speak to this as well. But companies are now able to gather data on a much, much greater level, whether they're using telematics devices or not. Lots of different ways to gather big data. And then, of course, the question is, how do you use it? Still a shortage of skilled drivers. And even if there are enough drivers out there, everybody wants the good ones, the best ones. And when you get the good ones, the last thing you want to do is lose them. So that's part of the environment for sure. Increased insurance costs, larger settlements, nuclear claims, $10 million claims, and companies that are just afraid to even go to trial as it relates to any type of legal action because of the possibility of losing. And then a focus on driver well-being. I'll come back to that here in a minute. Fence, anything you want to add to sort of like the environment as a whole?
No, I think the big one that you hit is that driver shortage piece, right? Everybody wants the good drivers, but drivers have options. And so, we're not just always looking at pay. We're not always just looking at environment. They're looking at an entire package. So when you're talking about a culture of safety, incentivizing drivers, it's enticing them that where they want to work. And then, of course, once you getting, hold on to them. But you got to get them through the door, and they've got to see that it's a company that they want to work for.
So, and while we're on this slide, we're going to spend a little more time on technology here in a minute. But while we're here, Paul asked a question. I'd like to know more. I'd like to know our thoughts. And I guess I'd turn this over to you, Fenster, on the widespread use of tracking devices, which can be used to measure behaviors related to acceleration, braking, et cetera, for safe driving. He's asking relative to what Progressive does on a consumer level, but obviously, the consumer level has really trailed, I think, the trucking industry use of this technology. I don't know if you want to jump in.
Yeah, so yeah, the data that you're pulling from the driver behavior, most of that originally when you're putting in the vehicles, they're seeing it as a negative, right? You're just watching my actions, you're watching me, you're using that to identify things that I'm doing wrong, and then either going to coach me or terminate based on actions. And really, we're looking at the data aspect of all of that pulling forward is if you've got 100 drivers, you might have three or four that have those bad habits, and yeah, you want to coach them and get them up to that level. But you've also got a pile of those drivers that are doing the right thing every single day and using that data to acknowledge that I haven't got an alert, I haven't got a notification, there's nothing that's come through for you in X amount of time. And acknowledging those safe behaviors so the data can be used in both ways. And sadly, most of them are using it in the opposite way. And that's what concerns drivers the most is what are you tracking and what are you going to do with it? And you can use that data as just as much, if not more, for positive affirmation than you can for making a driver feel like they're just not cutting it.
Yeah, I think it's great that you mentioned that. Obviously, this is going to be that theme's going to carry through some of what we're going to talk about going forward here, right? Positive recognition, but it's not a problem to sort of bury the lead up front and get people thinking about exactly that. It's not there. These devices weren't, or maybe they were initially designed to capture
Yeah.
the bad and reflect on the bad, but at the end of the day, they capture far more good than bad. And the question is, what do you do with it? And I guess I would add
Hmm.
this big data technology piece of this, just that it's not just about how fast you're going, how hard you're braking, and what have you, and taking videos of unfortunate incidents. It's also about location. Where are my vehicles on the road at all given time? It's about idling time and fuel costs, related to
Hmm.
excessive amounts of idling or other things. And then it really is going to get into, and stop me if you've heard about AI, but AI's and its ability to use its predictive capabilities to really reflect on which drivers are likely to have more incidents going forward based on their driving records and based on similar trends. So I'd factor all of that in. And I would just throw in also on the insurance side, again, I mentioned nuclear claims, but there's also insurance captives are out there. They're very, very popular. Smaller companies especially need these insurance captives. We work with insurance captives when they see a best practice and they see it working among some of their insured companies, they certainly like to see that carry through to others as well. Okay, moving on. And Fenster, again, I'll come back to you and see if you have anything you want to sort of add on the wellness side of things. It's not a wellness presentation. I did one actually on wellness last week, and I'm doing one tomorrow. It's the second part of the series, a presentation that specifically ties to the mental well-being and in the state of mind. Basically, the fact that workers, not strictly safety, not strictly drivers, but safety-sensitive workers, and what it means to work under stress and high levels of mental anxiety and what that does to your ability to work safe. But this slide, if it doesn't grab your attention, I don't know what would. It certainly grabbed mine, and I've now looked this up 15 different ways. Long haul career drivers, long haul, and I think that would include, long haul is what it says. But bottom line, career drivers are dying at an average age that is ridiculously less than just your average person, right? So 15, 16, 17 years early. The 61, this Project 61 popped up. You're welcome to go check it out yourself. But what they've really showed here, and it's like, if you drive for 2 years, this isn't necessarily the case, but if you spend the majority of your career behind the wheel, the issues with obesity and all the things those bring in, diabetes and hypertension and what have you, lack of regular exercise being, in a sitting position so much of the day, the fatality rates. I mean, we want to keep them safe on the road. We don't want them to have accidents and injuries for their own sake, for the company's sake, but far more of them are falling victim to healthy lifestyle choices or lack of healthy lifestyle choices. They don't get enough sleep. They disproportionately suffer from anxiety, depression. The average United States right now has less than 12% on average population is smoking. More than double that is still smoking as it relates to drivers. And so somebody had said to me recently, we were getting ready for this, said, well, it's not a wellness, and it's not a wellness thing. We'll get off this at some point and talk about all other aspects. But when we talk about questions like what motivates drivers, how is that any different from what motivates human beings? And do drivers want to be healthier? Right. Don't get me wrong. My dad smoked for a lot of years. He's 86 years old and he's still here. Thankfully, he doesn't smoke anymore. But he never wanted me to get up in his grill about it. I can tell you that. But he always wanted to quit. So what did he want? He wanted to quit. He wanted to do it on his terms. And so poor diet, poor exercise, these things come back to, sleep apnea, tired, being obese, sleep apnea, tired driving, smoking, trips to the doctor's office, lack of time behind the wheel. You can easily see how mental stress and other anxiety issues and hypertension all can contribute to a lack of safety. And so when it comes to that, wellness can very much be a safety issue. Again, Fenster, I don't know if you wanted to jump in on that point at all, talk
Yeah.
about your experience.
No, I actually, this is a big one for me too, because it's a hard topic when to try to motivate someone to want to be healthier for themselves, right? And that's a really hard conversation to have with people. I do think it has a direct connection to safety because, you mentioned it's sleep apnea, it's poor diet, it's the decision making behind the wheel that's impacted by the poor health and the mental stress. So this is a big one for me because it's a hard thing to motivate. I think it's easier to motivate a person to make good decisions behind the wheel. It's harder to impact the decisions that they make when they're at home by themselves. And that's a lot of where this comes from. It's the exercise and the eating. And you can motivate all you want when they clock in to clock out. It's that time in between that's hard to impact.
And
Yes.
Fenster, Brian, I wonder, I'd be particularly curious, are there ways to then close that loop when we talk about the incentive programs and the initiatives and so forth, and develop ones that are not only recognizing the safe drivers, but also then working to address some of these other larger issues, right? That
Hmm.
ultimately are all sort of looped together. When we get there, I'd be curious to see, like, yeah, we found that this not only is recognition, but is also helping on the sleep front or on the food front or on the smoking front. I don't know, but I'd be
Hmm.
curious.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
and it's go
I'll
ahead.
jump right to the chase, and the answer is absolutely yes. Yeah, go ahead, Fenster.
No, this is one thing that we push for long. Anybody on this call right now, you have a driver meeting. The first thing you usually do is you stop in and you get a box of donuts for everybody to have a meeting, right? So we're not doing our people any benefit when we're supplying that food. Now, they're going to want to eat that way more than you're going to bring into something healthy. Totally get it. But when we're supplying that, we're just feeding the problem.
And then yes, and Peter, thanks for the question. And David, I saw your question as well, and I don't have an answer for you. The question from David is there a study for drivers who are working that last mile, your delivery drivers versus these long
Mm,
haul drivers? I suspect the numbers are much better because they're in and out of the vehicle. They're actually doing some more industrial athlete type work, and so I think that matters a great deal. But I don't have a snap answer for you, but I will follow up with one and see if we can't get data that relates to that specifically. And yes, Peter, the wellness programs, the best safety incentive programs that we have out there, safety recognition reward programs have eventually over time, especially more recently, and we've all seen the rise of wellness companies that they're out there everywhere now, right? But and we've all built these platforms into our platforms now as well. But the rise of wellness as an issue that can be dealt with as part of a comprehensive program. We always had stretching, even for anything safety related, we always had stretching and hydration and things like this. I can go back far enough. Republic Services at one point hired a former NFL player to come in as a pilot program and really get these guys into the fitness area and we're working out and what have you. It was working great, but it's like anything else. When he took the light off of it, sort of
mhm.
the effort sort of went away. And the question is how do I make it more sustainable? And we'll come back to that as well. Okay. So all right. So as a foundational beginning of why, what matters and what motivates drivers, right? Well, again, what motivates people and how motivated are my people to begin with, right? So this is really where I guess I'd start with say, okay, well, motivation really matters. I want engaged workers. Engaged workers are more likely to follow safety procedures, more likely to do something healthy, more likely to attend meetings, go above and beyond for safety, mentor new employees, become behind the wheel instructors, all the things you can extrapolate from that what a more engaged worker is likely to do. And so what are we looking at here? Well, on average, this is what the State of the American Workplace by Gallup study has shown, and this has been repeated by other companies. Gallup is the most common one cited. It's been going on for decades. It is now surveyed, I don't even know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of workers over those years. And it shows something very consistent. Those bars in the middle don't change much, but even the slight changes matter. So when we had a low of 13% for disengaged workers right before COVID, and it went as high as 18% just a year and a half, 2 years ago, that's telling. I mean, a 4% increase in disengaged or a 5% increase in disengaged workers. If you have 1,000 employees out there, that's 50 people, and disengaged workers are bad for your company. They're bad for your brand. They're far more likely to get in an accident, right? And then you get into the bigger percentage, the 50 to 60% range. Those are not bad workers. These are just not considered to be highly engaged workers by Gallup's 12 question study. They're there, they're good enough, but they're not as good as they could be, and they're not as motivated as they could be. And the other group there, that 1/3, that 30% or so, are actively engaged. These people who are sort of like into it when their feet hit the floor in the morning, they're good to go. Even they can be moved in the right direction, and they certainly can be thanked for being great workers. But add it all up, distill it all down, what you really have here, according to Gallup, who's been studying it longer than anybody, is a $500 billion worth of cost to the economy and whatever piece of that flows to your company in any given year relative to the fact that you have workers that are not that engaged on the job, right? So, and you see that on the bottom there, millennials are the largest part of the workforce now. By the way, I don't know if you know this. If more interactive, I'd ask the question, but I guess I'll just tell you. The oldest millennials are now 45 years old, right? So if I say, when somebody says millennial, I think youngster like Fenster. Speaking of health and fitness, by the way, Fenster can throw a 100 pound, sack on his back and climb Mount Everest. But if you don't know that about him, you'll find out. But the 45-year-olds are millennials. Okay, so 40 to 45-year-olds are millennials, as are the 30 and up crowd, 30 to 45. And so we're talking about that crowd, but we're talking Gen Z. Oldest Gen Zs are now 30 years old. The youngest Gen Zs are getting out of high school in the next couple of years. They're your future drivers, right? And the further you go down the age spectrum, the more disengaged they get if they work for companies that don't actively try to keep them engaged. So it's really important to understand the environment now, and really important to see what's and really understand what's coming next. Okay. So this is what that study results in, right? When you break it down, you say to yourself, okay, well, let's take everybody in this industry, whatever the industry might be, trucking, transportation, or even more granular than that, right? Specific types of trucking and specific types of fleet. When they sit there and say, okay, well, let's compare everybody in that same company type, and look at who's the most engaged. When they take the top 25% most engaged companies in any given space, and they compare it to the bottom 25% companies strictly by employee engagement. They're not looking at anything else. They're not looking at anything else. They're not looking at their 10K. They're not looking at their quarterly report. They're not looking at any data, okay, about that until after they figure out who's in the top 25 and who's in the bottom 25%. And then they compare it, and then the numbers speak for themselves. And this screen really gets you to, I guess I would say, the C-suite information. We talk about getting buy-in from upper levels of management. It's really about getting them to understand, not just we want our people to be healthy, we want them to go home safe. They want that. Of course, they want that. They're people, and they want everybody to go home safe, same as you do. But it also helps them to understand that we're far more likely to have accidents, far more likely to have accidents, if we're in that bottom 25% engagement level. So you start and you say to yourself, listen, I want to improve my safety training. I want to improve this. I want to improve that. Those are all good goals. Starts with employee engagement. A disengaged employee simply is not going to learn or retain or care as much as an engaged employee. So you start by saying to yourself, how do I get them more engaged? And then how do I apply these other things I want to do? Turnover, far, far higher. It depends on the industry, but far higher in poorly engaged companies. And you look at that bottom row, in terms of people willing to recommend to their friend, hey, I work for this company. You should apply for a job. It's a great company to work for. That has such enormous value. It's almost a net promoter score, right? Far better customer loyalty, far better productivity, and far better profitability in companies whose employees are engaged at a higher level. Again, Fenster or anybody else wants to jump into that, please do so.
No, this is the first time I'm seeing these stats, and it's pretty eye-opening.
Yeah. Truly, truly, and all you do is Google State of the American Workplace, Gallup State of the American Workplace, or the global workplace if you're a global company. Look at that data and look at the what they extrapolate from that, and you'll see exactly this, and you'll see the 12 questions. I'm happy to share them with everybody as well. But the 12 questions include things like somebody at my company cares about me as a person, right?
Mm.
The work I do here is important to the overall mission of this company, right? There's questions about basically you and your understanding of the company you work for and what that company's trying to accomplish, and your role in doing that. Okay, so we're trying to get to a great safety culture. Everybody's trying to get to a great safety culture. Even if you have a great safety culture, you want one that's even better, right? That 1%, that continuous improvement. And what does that look like? And again, Fenster, anything you want to jump on this, I would just ask you to do so. Um, these are the things that certainly in All-Star's long history of running these programs, these are what we distill as, the evidence of a strong and great safety culture, right? So one that reinforces safe training and work and policies and practices, right? I can't tell you how many companies that don't do anything to reinforce their training. They put the training out there, they check the box. We did the training. How do we know if anybody retained it? And there's obvious ways, and there are ways to do so within a recognition program, and there are ways to do so in that recognition program that makes people feel better about the fact that you're paying attention to their efforts, right? So, if you sat them in front of a computer screen and said, "There's the training platform," let me know when you're done. You've missed a huge opportunity to not just make the training more retainable, more understandable, and make them retain it, but to have an opportunity to truly get them to feel good about the fact that the company is engaging with them as an employee and not treating them like a number. And again, Fenster, any place you want to jump in on this, but feedback, employee recognition, needless to say, that's a lot of work here. I mean, it's meant to be a two-way communication. I guess, if you want to talk a little bit
Yes.
about the way we talk to your workers at Republic over the years.
Yeah, and that's definitely where I want to jump into, because not every employee wants to be recognized in the exact same way, right? It's everybody's different. We got different age groups. We brought that up, and different backgrounds, and everybody sees recognition very different, but the one consistent thing you can do for an employee is say thank you. And really, it doesn't take a lot of effort to do that on a consistent basis. And you can have all the greatest programs in the world, but if you cannot communicate it and you're not truly passionate and earnest when you say thank you for the efforts that they're putting in there, it's going to fall short, right? So it's on that leader that's going to step in there and have those conversations and shake those hands and let those people know what their effort they're putting into it is actually appreciated, is when you start to get a culture of safety. When it's not just, and you've heard it probably in a lot of companies too, is safety was important this month, and then next month it's not as important, right? There's another initiative that took safety, took over for safety, and it went to the back burner. If you want to create a good culture of safety and good recognition, it has to be consistent, and it cannot hit the back burner for any reason. And so once they see that consistency, that safety message is going to be out there all the time, and you're going to be consistent with recognition, that's when it's going to start making a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Peter, did you want to jump in on any of that? Didn't want to. Okay, gotcha. I just want to hit on a couple little words that Fenster said because they're on screen there, and I'm not going to read you these bullets because you can read certainly, but he hit on communication, right? And we always consider this two-way communication. You think about communication, it's very often you think about the mothership telling the worker bees, how it's going to be. And of course, you're a company, you run a company, you certainly have to have communication flow from top to top down, or from the as I said, sort of like the central entity to all the managers and workers and what have you. Clearly, that has to happen. But if you don't have communication going back the other way, you're missing a huge opportunity. And that's what I would say to you when it comes to these engagement, these recognition programs, surveys, quizzes, built-in badges, built-in opportunities for them to join committees and be recognized for joining committees, for mentoring new employees. These types of things get that second layer of communication flowing back in the other direction, and people need to be heard. When we do, let's just say, safety surveys, we do very targeted, specific safety surveys, and a lot of those are multiple choice, easy to answer questions, but there's always open-ended text boxes that say things like, what additional training or PPE would make you safer on the job? We just did one with Caterpillar, had hundreds and hundreds of responses, and most people typed in something meaningful. Some people said, oh, everything's great or whatever. Most people went in there and in some cases typed in sentences. If you took the time to type in sentences of what additional training or PPE would make you safer on the job, the person who reads it might think to themselves, we already have that training. Well, that's not the point. The point is there's a worker who's just telling you that they'd feel they could improve safety on the job if they had better training there. Maybe the training exists and they don't know. Maybe they did it 2 years ago and forgot it. But it's still telling, and especially if you get 10 responses like that. We're doing a program for the World Trade Center. I'm sorry. Well, we did one for the World Trade Center reconstruction site. This one is also for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and it's specifically for the JFK airport rebuild. And we did a survey down there, and they had an overwhelming number of responses that said, what would make you safer on the job? And people were talking about dust control and better lighting on the pathways. I mean, it came through in dozens and dozens and dozens of suggestions, to the point where the safety manager down there said, I knew it was an issue. I didn't realize it was that bad, right? That's only going to flow there because they have an engaged workforce that's a part of an ongoing program that's giving back that answers to these survey questions, and then it's timely. And then we're sharing within that program. You spoke, we listened. This is on the award site that runs the whole program that people are coming to every month. You spoke, we listened. Here's what we're going to do about it. And you can imagine how important that is to a worker on the site that didn't think that their voice just went into some vacuum someplace and never got listened to.
Yeah, Brian, I think that's critical. And what we've often found as well, and I think you see this across industries, is what we think we know might often not be the case. And if you're creating programs for your workers, for the members of the team, well, ask them. And what you think might be particularly convincing or particularly effective or will move the needle may, in fact, actually not be right at all. And so having that communication. And then I think the last point you said right there is closing the loop. I spent many years in politics working for different mayors and so forth. And the thing that most aggravated people was that not so much the survey, but it was like, well, you never did anything with it. Right. And so I think that's also critical as well, right? Like the communication is great, the surveys are great. And then you sure as hell better do something on it and report back and say, well, we heard you, this is what we're doing. Or even if we're not going to do anything, and then explain why, or we're going to do something different. But closing that feedback loop, I think, is just as critical as eliciting the information in the first place.
It's critical and it's risky if you don't do it. I mean, you mentioned politics, you go back, go all the way back to James Carville, it's the economy, stupid, right? I mean, if you're listening properly, you better not be focused on what you think the issue is, as much as what your audience is telling you the issue is. And when it comes to your workers in a safety sensitive environment, that is just really, really crucial. I mentioned Caterpillar, that we had a great case study on that, great case study on Amerigas as well. Again, unfortunately, Rick couldn't join us here, but I can tell you that Amerigas, in the recognition rewards program we do with Amerigas, there is a monthly quiz, as there is in many of our programs. Every single month there's training. The following month there's a 5-question quiz. Get all 5 questions right, you get rewarded with some points. The points obviously accrete to prizes eventually. You don't have to take the quiz. The quizzes were voluntary before we started running the program, and they're still voluntary now. Before we ran the program, they'd have 15 to 20% of their workforce would answer the quiz. Now they're over 80%. 80 to 85% of everybody takes the quiz every single month and has now for years. You tell me whether or not that's likely to make a company safer, right? So it's that type of engagement level. Obviously, the reward component adds buzz, but you're talking about less than 1% of pay in a rewards program is what it takes to move the needle. And, if you do a cost of living increase of 3% every year, you realize, that that's a relatively small amount of money if it gets you the results you're looking for. All right. Want to move on, obviously, because we don't want to run out of time here without getting through the end of this and getting some Q&A. I'm sorry if I've missed any. And Jess, if I have, you're welcome to just jump in and tell me what they are. Want to jump over to telematics a little bit. It is, big or small, these devices are available to companies out there now. And they're becoming only more increasingly becoming a standard part of what's needed, to really try to keep your workforce safe and what have you. And again, Fenster can speak to this certainly from his new role, not to mention his old role. And I'll ask you to do that here in a minute, Fenster. But that first stat on the far left comes from the Motives and the Lytics and the Samsaras and everybody else that we work with directly out there, where we're getting their data directly to help us work with our clients in rewarding drivers for being safe on the job. But if I look at what all of the telematics ELD companies put out there for data, some will tell you 20, 25%, some will tell you 50% or more change and reduction in claims after putting these devices in vehicles or getting vehicles that have these devices, right? So sort of that average number is about 34% of what these, and when I say they claim, I don't doubt I've seen for myself that they're absolutely right, that they get this huge drop in claims when they start putting these devices in vehicles. It just has it has a very positive effect. It can have a negative effect on perceptions with drivers. We know that. And there's a way to tamp that down, but a very positive effect on how well people drive when they're more aware of the fact that it's being monitored, right? Similarly, we had about a 37% drop in claims when we launched, we and the industry as a whole, not strictly what we do, but the industry as a whole that provides these recognition reward programs. If you hold everything else the same and just say, well, okay, the only thing that changed from last year to this year is we started recognizing and rewarding our drivers for doing it right. We get on average about a 37% drop in claims. I mentioned that Caterpillar case study. They actually had something approaching 50% drop in claims in year one. No accident hiding, no injury hiding. I'll come back to that as well. All done on individual basis. Your individual behavior, action, reaction. You're safe on the job as an individual. You get rewarded, recognized and rewarded for your behavior. We communicate group goals. We only reward individual behaviors and what have you. But anyway, the point is that you get a 37% drop when you run, on average, a recognition program relative to otherwise normal operating operations. You get a 34% drop on average when you put telematics in devices in vehicles. You get a multiplying effect when you do both, but a very, very small percentage of fleets using telematics devices are using a properly built safety recognition reward program, right? And the data collected by those devices, and not just those devices, data you have in general. You certainly know how many miles somebody's driven and what have you, but the data collected by those devices is enormously powerful in rewarding those that are getting it right. You're gonna take the people, the driver with a really high lytic score, and you're gonna coach them. Maybe you're gonna let them go if you have to, if they consistently do it. You're gonna do those things to bring attention to poor driving habits of your bad drivers or those that have had bad months. The question is, what about recognizing and rewarding those that are getting it right? What about recognizing and rewarding the coaches along the way? And that's where we say, that's where you get a multiplying effect in a positive way. Again, Fenster's taking a job with a company that does this, puts these devices in your vehicles. So take it from there.
Yeah. So, one thing, not all data is good data, right? Just because you have it, it's great to have, but if you're not doing anything with it, it's kind of useless. So, to Brian's point, if you start looking at what data you're pulling in and how are you actually going to do it, it's not just driver behavior. Technology also provides drivers a better opportunity to make better decisions too. So it's not just a combination of telematics and harsh braking and distracted driving. It's technology put into a truck can actually help a driver make better decisions, reducing those claims. And it actually encourages drivers when they see that a company is making an investment in that, right? When they see a company not just putting telematics in there to track my behaviors, but I'm trying to put this in there so that you have better tools to be safer drivers, it gives them motivation too. And this is getting across the board. Everybody wants telematics inside their truck, so you're not going to get away from it. It's now taking what you're collecting, and to your point, Brian, recognizing those drivers that are doing the right thing. And yeah, you got to coach the ones that need to, but that top 10% of drivers go out every single day and don't get alerts because they are doing the right thing. And those are the folks that you want to put on the pedestal a little bit. For one, acknowledge them. And then, you know what? Those are the ones that you want to ask, what do you do every day to make those better decisions? You're not doing anything different each day, but how can we take that knowledge and coach the rest of those folks?
Yeah, and just to build off that for one more second, because it's really, really important. It's not to Fenster's point, it's not just and Eric put in something said, too much data is just noise. Absolutely. If you first of all, it can be noise, it can be useless if you don't know which drivers are in trucks, which by the way,
Hmm.
we've had that with clients. And one of the first things that putting a recognition program in place will do is we'll go to that client and say, listen, we have to, before we can do anything useful with the data you're collecting from these telematics devices or other ways, you have to start by getting it right to begin with, which is for starters, you need to know which driver's in the truck, right? You
Hmm.
can't if all you're waiting, if you're just waiting for the accident and then you know which driver it is and you're gonna punish them, that's fine. But start by knowing which drivers swipe into a truck, and obviously the technology allows them to do that. It's just a question of whether or not they're ignoring it, and that's where when you get a big pile of data and it's not organized properly, or there's something fundamentally wrong at the beginning with it, like you don't know which drivers are in the vehicles, that you clearly have noise, not actionable data.
Hmm.
But when you have actionable data, which is very doable, and by the way, especially with AI's ability to crunch the data that you're getting, you can get a really clear picture of what's going on driver to driver. Now throw in a very litigious society and nuclear claims. And I guess the point I would make is that it's not just a question of saying you have data, you're not maximizing your use of data. You're putting yourself at risk.
Hmm.
If you're collecting a ton of data, and Fenster, I know you've seen this, if you're collecting a ton of data that's telling you that these drivers, maybe they're not having accidents, but they're clearly not driving safely, and you're not coaching them up, and you're not rewarding the coaches for doing the coaching in a timely manner. You know that a prosecuting attorney will have a field day with that, right? If you're not actually using the data in the way in which it can be used to drive continuous improvement.
Hmm. No, you're right. And that's, I think, to Eric's point, is all that data being collected. It's you have the information, you have the knowledge to know who needs that extra attention. It's just using it and taking the time as a leader to spend time with the employee.
Right. Okay. So, these are the sort of, we just talked about this, so I won't spend too much time here, but these are some of the business benefits that we're talking about here of, first of all, we have 80% of drivers felt more valued when it comes to using technology if they were positively recognized, right? So, and that's in line with, in fact, if anything, it's a little low. But the bottom line is if you just said people, drivers are people like anybody else. If you just said to your kids, to your spouse, to your friend, would it make you feel good if somebody told you did a good job? The answer is yes. I mean, almost exclusively across the board. And honestly, I would tell you that the 20% that said, nah, I don't care. Well, they can say they don't care until you pat them on the back and tell them they did a good job, and they'll still get that same dopamine hit that the rest of us will get. So recognizing drivers, recognizing workers, recognizing people for doing it right is a way to obviously improve their behavior and increase their engagement, reduce turnover, and all the things that are on screen here. And I think it's just fundamentally, understood, right? I can't get my kids to my two sons to do anything if they're behind me. If I'm talking to them and they're on their phone and they're nothing has gotten through to them, nothing, right? But if I have their attention and I treat them like the adults they are, I can get them to change their behavior regardless of what that's related to. Um, safety is one spoke on a overall engagement wheel. The opportunity we asked earlier, I commented earlier about training, right? Training isn't a box to be checked. It's a huge opportunity to engage with workers. So is onboarding, right? You hired new workers, you onboarded new workers, you got people who raise their hand to be behind the wheel instructors, you got people who raise their hand to be coaches. Take your pick. It's an opportunity. Every opportunity you have to engage with a worker isn't one of those, oh, God, it's something I got to do. It should be viewed properly, knowing that engagement is so important. You say to yourself, well, how am I going to make that more meaningful? How am I going to make that engagement more meaningful, that opportunity to be? Because they're out on the road, they're driving 8 or 9 hours a day. They might do that for weeks or months at a time. You may barely see them, or only through your manager see them. Have you given your manager the ability and the coaching to use those as an engagement opportunity? So, the corporate identity, the Logan, we talked, yes, Peter mentioned earlier, we talked about the pizza parties, right? And maybe there should be a fruit platter in there just based on our wellness initiatives, right? But we talked about you giving them a sweatshirt, giving them lunch, giving them recognition. All of those opportunities are opportunities for engagement. Clearly, they should all be part of the mix. But your wellness program done right is a massive opportunity to engage with people. Wellness programs that companies launch on average have 15 to 20% participation levels if they're just launched and basically left to their own. When you put an incentive solution together with a wellness program, the numbers approach 50%. 50% participation levels, more than double, in fact, close to triple participation levels in wellness programs where you put people into groups and reward them for how many steps they took. Put them into groups and reward them for counting calories. By the way, those two things, counting steps and counting calories, are something I'm doing right now. Maybe I got a ways to go, obviously, but in our own company program, we're doing a step competition right now. I'm telling you right now, I'm getting to 10,000 steps a day if I got to walk around my kitchen 50 times at the end of the night, which I do with my wife, who's in it as well, in terms of promoting, into the home. And I've agreed as part of my own participation in the program to count the calories of the food I'm eating, and I'm finding it to be very, very helpful in terms of managing my weight. Programs like that played out in large companies they won't bring everybody in, but they will bring a good number of your workers in.
Yeah, Brian, I didn't want to say anything, but
Yeah,
you
please.
are looking pretty svelte. So, yeah, clearly
Hey,
something's working.
wait till you
Um,
see me next month.
I wanted to be cognizant of time and getting people to be able to chime in and stuff. But I think a specific question that I had for you and for Fenster, and maybe you're getting there is, we've gone through the science now. We know they're working. Some specific examples of, well, how have companies done it well? What have these programs look like?
Yeah, well, thank you. This slide probably speaks to that for sure. And thank you, Paul, for the comment. Yes, they can be wellness programs, recognition can be extremely popular. It really can be. If you run something before, your company's run it before and it fell flat, don't consider that to be the evidence. Done right, done in group competitions, fun challenges, some sort of reward component to it as well, and you can get some really, really good, powerful programs. This one I mentioned Caterpillar a little bit. This is Milton Cat. It's a 1,700 person cat dealership here up in the Northeast where we are. We did for this program and a whole bunch of others like it. We do a safety selfie, or basically, take a picture of you with the awards you've earned in the program and send it in to us. Totally voluntary. Do it or don't do it, whatever. We get hundreds of people sending in these pictures with their awards, showing how psyched they are to get their award. Now, you want to talk about, does this seem like an engaged company? They cut their incident rate in half, and they did it with a smile on their face, and they did it by basically telling people they run surveys, they reward people for answering the surveys. Most people answered the survey. The data they got back was extremely actionable. The safety manager there built his entire platform last year around the feedback that he got in his safety survey for what additional training and PPE they'd want to put in place. Literally, it helped him map out his entire year. They run wellness challenges, they do all these things where we reward people. And you can imagine that it's a pretty good evidence that you've got a good culture, and certainly one they had not experienced before, when you get this quantity of people, and this is just a sampling of it, sending in pictures of themselves with the rewards, telling us stories about how much they like the program. So, I mean, there's, sort of just evidence of what a good culture looks like, or how you can see one evolving. This is a total awkward pivot, but I know we're down about 7 or 8 minutes. And so I had mentioned that we would include this, and Jess said she thought it'd be good. So I just want to tell you, and if anybody wants, I'll be happy to send you the 2 or 3 links that lead to this information. But what's OSHA's position on safety incentive programs? Most people have something in mind that was true 10 years ago, or 20 or 30 years ago. This is just one statement from the website, but incentive programs can be an important tool to promote workplace safety and health. They go on to talk about how much they love proactive programs that recognize and reward people for going above and beyond for safety in a proactive way. But they also talk about how rate-based programs, ones where you can get rewarded for not having an accident or not having an injury or putting up a zero lytic score or Samsara, whatever, those things are perfectly fine as well if they're done in the right way, which is exactly how we build them as an example. And so OSHA's position, when 2018, they went through this. I went down to DC a bunch of times, a whole bunch of others did. We showed them what worked and what didn't work. They got input from everybody else as well. They're bullish on incentive programs. They don't want them to be built wrong. And the beauty of it is what OSHA thinks is the wrong way to build a program is a program that doesn't work well anyway. They don't want you to throw everybody's name in a hat and pick one winner and give a pickup truck away. They don't want you to use cash. That's the other thing. You get into the tax code, and 274J of the tax code will tell you flat out that the cost of safety programs up to a limit is tax deductible to the employer and tax free to the employee. Okay, but not if there's cash or gift cards. Can't be anything gift card, cash, or cash like gas cards involved. But as long as it's tangible experiential awards, you can they encourage you to do it, and it has the tax benefits as well. So just a couple of notes on that. Happy to send anybody who wants to just message after, and we'll go ahead and push out sort of the links to this information and the sort of the summary documents that cover it as well.
Brian, could I throw something in on that
Please.
last line there, that awards? Because that was a big thing, at Republic, the tangible item. And the whole basis around the program that we had in place was if they spent their earned rewards on an item and they built up for that item's going to probably stick around the house for a little while. They're going to use it camping. They're going to every time they go to use that item, they're going to remember what they did to earn that compared to a cash or gift card. And we looked at it in this way: it was cash and money in their pocket could turn into beer and gas money, right? It's gone instantly. And yeah, they benefit for everybody wants cash. Let's be honest, right? But that tangible item lives way beyond the initial reward. And there's items that, people have for years and they know where they earned it and how they achieved it. So there's so much value in that.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up. That was the environment we came into when we started working with Republic 20 years ago, which was everybody was getting gift cards and safety wasn't changing. And so there's nothing memorable about a gift card. To your point, people will ask for cash, people ask for gift cards, but when you go give them an Amazon gift card, they're going to use it to buy groceries and trash bags and light bulbs and batteries, and none of that's memorable. So
Yeah.
you want the fishing poles and the golf clubs and the TVs and the pocketbooks. There's anybody you ask and say, "Where'd you get that golf club?" Will tell you, "I got it 10 years ago for being a safe worker." That connecting the award to the behavior is crucial to its success. And that's why report rewards programs, properly built recognition reward programs have a 4-to-1 return on investment, $4 return on investment for every dollar spent because people can remember being recognized, appreciated, and rewarded. So this is sort of the closing slide, if you will. And I know we're down to 5 minutes, so I won't, rather than go through, we just went through all this, right? Getting manager support and using tangible rewards and what have you. We just hit it all. So it's there on the deck. You're welcome to have the deck. But I guess I'll ask Jess if you have any questions or if there are any questions you think we should get to before we close. And you're muted.
Yeah, I know. I was just going to ask Finster, what other types of best practices can you share with us from Republic? What worked and what didn't work well?
Yeah, well, we've seen both sides, where well and not well. And I'll tell you the one thing that we got so much traction on is if the manager took the time to acknowledge the employee in a group setting. Like, as they're having a safety meeting, they're doing something. It didn't need to be some widespread celebration, cake and cookies, sorry, fruit and vegetables. It didn't need to be anything like that. It just needed to be, I just want to thank this employee for going the last 30 days safe. That's it. But in a group setting, you start to see the drivers and their chests puff a little bit more. They're being acknowledged for being safe when they go years and years and years with nothing, and then all of a sudden now I'm being recognized. That true interaction on a monthly or a consistent basis made a huge difference in the program.
Yeah, and again, the words that are coming out of Fenster's mouth are right. Consistent nudges, right? Consistent nudges through recognition and rewards. You can't do it once. I mean, if your program is, hey, listen, at the end of the year, everybody who drove accident and injury free at the end of the year is going to get a reward. It's okay to have a yearly component to your program, but if that's your whole program, then for 355 out of 365 days, nobody's thinking about it. At the very end, they're like, "Oh, I wonder if I'll get the reward," and that's it. You need regular, consistent nudges, especially wellness, but safety as well. to drive behavior change. And the part about face-to-face recognition, Fester just hit on as well. I didn't mention that earlier, but where you can do it, it's not always easy to do. Certainly not easy to do with long haul truckers, but where you can get face-to-face recognition, even if it's just periodically as part of the program, we know how powerful that is. People recognize in front of their peers. Republic did a great thing every year. They have end of year banquets every single year. They'd call those people that did have a perfect year up to the front of the room and give them an extra special above and beyond recognition gift as a little Logan merchandise in a kit screaming safety. And they would do so in front of their coworkers, in front of their families. And you'd see people taking pictures and what have you. And it's, you can tell it's a powerful element. And you want to walk across that stage at the end of the year as part of a comprehensive program. So Jesse, thank you for the question. Fenster, I know we're just about out of time. I don't know if there's any other questions, but anything else you want to add as a kind of a closing thought?
No, I think it go back to that initial question that we asked, and the 40% that don't have a program are thinking about not putting one in. I would try to get that 40% switched over to, think about coming up with something. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to spend a lot of money, but just a simple, some type of program, and then keep it fresh. You can't just have one program and let the thing run for eternity. You have to be creative with your program and change it up every while. Keep it fresh, keep people guessing. But it can't just be a one and done.
Yeah, there's a poll, and thank you for both those points. Really good. There's a poll question that Jess just put up there as well, and interested to see if people found some take-home value from what they heard today. So please give it a quick answer if you would. But it's a great point. Two great points, really. One is it's not set it and forget it. Obviously, when you build these programs, and I know it's self-serving. That's what we do. We're not here to be self-serving, but if you can do it all internally, great. I would say rely on experts to help you keep that program built and fresh and continue it to be compelling, because it's not, you don't set it once, come back to it in a year and see if it's working. You should use the data that the program itself produces to constantly reinforce and build a better program. I guess I would say that that's absolutely crucial for making a program that's going to actually drive behavior change over the long haul.
Yeah, and Brian, I would jump in there. I think just like you would be very intentional and pragmatic with the safety program that you develop to check the pressure of your tires of your fleets, or to check the mirrors, or to check any of these things, why would we assume that something that is sometimes perceived as soft and squishy shouldn't be approached with the same intentionality and rigor and dedication to improvement, especially when we see the results there? And I think, for me, that's sort of the big takeaway here, is that we know these work, but as Spencer said, it can't be set it and forget it. You need to approach it like you would approach any other serious program that you're going to put time and resources in. And if anything, we see that when you do that, the ROI is quite dramatic. So on that note, I just want to thank Fenster, of course, Brian, and your entire team. Heidi's on the call as well, Jessica and the Quirky team. And then all 40 plus of you who joined us today, everyone from, I won't get everyone, but I know UPS was here. I think City Harvest was here, going through lots of different TSR members from across the country. So I thank you all for taking the time. I hope it was helpful. We will summarize and share out this information across a couple different channels. It'll be in our newsletter this month. And then we'll do it on social as well. But again, I found the conversation really quite illuminating. Brian, thank you so much for leading it, and appreciate all the work that you do. And I hope everyone has a great rest of the day. Questions, follow up with me directly. I'm happy to connect you with either Fenster or Brian or anybody else here to learn more, or reach out to them directly. So have a great day, everybody. Thanks so much. And
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Fenster. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Jess, we good? Anything you want to hang on for?
We're good. No, I was just hanging on for the last little comments to see if anybody had questions, but we're good. Thank you so much, Brian. You did an excellent job.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And you have the deck, so certainly welcome to share it with anybody that wants it if they want it. And if anybody asks after the fact, ask for some of the information I referenced that we weren't automatically sending, we're happy to send that, of course, as well.
Yeah, that sounds great. I will share it along. Thanks
All
so
right.
much, Brian.
Excellent. Thanks again.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thanks. Bye.